Baptist Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our Wesley Bible class. And this morning we're going to be talking about chapters 21 and 22. Hopefully we can get that far in 1 Samuel. Things are beginning to build up, and we're beginning to see patterns that set precedences for not just the realm of David, but we see precedents for an understanding of how religion is supposed to work that bled into, say, the prophet Isaiah and some of the lesser prophets. We also see how it has an effect on Jesus' ministry as well. And there are patterns in here that we're seeing contemporaneously in our own society today. So let's see what's happened to David. David is not the Lamb of God, but he is definitely on the lamb. So he's running away from Saul. Okay? So this is what happened. Jonathan confirms to David that there's a death threat from the king. He's going to kill David if he can get his hands on him. So David takes off, and he's by himself, and evidently he leaves in a big hurry because he doesn't take very much with him. So let's see what happens to David. David came to Nob's place, to the priest Ahimelech. Ahimelech came trembling to meet David and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" Good questions. Okay, who is Ahimelech? What happened was that when the Philistines captured the Ark of the Lord, the priests who were assigned to carry the Ark of the Lord were from the lineage of Eli, the priest. And these are the last line of Eli priests, okay? And they have been removed from Sukkoth, where the ark was, or Shiloh, where the ark was, and now they are in a town called Nob, and they and their families have settled there, okay? Now, Ahimelech is their high priest. So he's primarily responsible for all the rituals that are taking place in Nob, and he has preserved the tradition of the rituals, okay? So David comes into Nob, and Ahimelech comes trembling before him. Okay, now you're going to see some dissembling taking place later on, as if he is totally ignorant of what's going on between David and Saul. Listen, everybody knows what's going on between David and Saul. Okay, they have more confirmation about what's going on between David and Saul than David had before he asked Jonathan. Okay, they've got everybody's number. Okay. He says, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" Well, it's a good question, because he is the captain of Saul's army, right? Not captain of his army, but he's captain of Saul's bodyguard. He's the head of the Secret Service. Okay, why are you by yourself? David said to the priest Ahimelech, "The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, no one must know anything of the matter about which I send you and with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such place." All right, now what does this mean? It means he's lying. Okay, David is lying. He's good at it, by the way. David's really good at lying, although not entirely, but he's good at this. And so he says, "I'm on a secret mission." And so because I'm on a secret mission, I have this cover. See, I don't have any weapons with me. I look like an ordinary guy, you know. That's why I'm walking around like this, because this is very hush-hush. Okay. Okay. Now then, what have you at hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here. The priest answered David, "I have no ordinary bread at hand, only holy bread, provided that the young men have kept themselves from women." Okay, this is interesting. Okay, this is the showbread. It goes on the altar of the Lord. It's supposed to stay there a week. It's supposed to be the finest bread that you can make. Okay, it's an offering to the Lord. Nobody is allowed to eat this bread but the priests. Okay, this is not common bread. So he's saying, I might give you the bread, But you've got to meet all the ritual requirements before you can eat the bread, which has nothing to do with David being a priest. Okay? David answered the priest, indeed, okay, hang on. I have no ordinary bread, provided the young men have kept themselves from women. So, if you're going into a holy war, you're not supposed to have sex before you go into a holy war. So what he's doing is he's inquiring of whether or not David is going into a holy war and that everybody is consecrated and pure enough to eat the showbread. Okay, well, they're not supposed to eat the showbread anyway. All right, David answered the priest, indeed, women have been kept from us as always when I go on an expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy even when it is a common journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy? So he's saying he's going on jihad. He's going on a holy war. Okay? He's going on a holy mission, sacred mission. And so everybody that's going with him is pure. Well, when you find out who's going with David, eventually you find out these are not really that pure. Okay? So he's lying again. So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread except the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. Here's my other page. Oh dear, what happened to my other page? Oh, there. Okay. I don't have all my stuff here. All right. Yeah, I know. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul were there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg, the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. Okay. As an Edomite, he is not an Israelite. Okay? This comes up later, but he is not bound by the restrictions that normally attain to anyone who's a Jew. So, he's a foreigner, but he's keeping Saul's sheep. So he's somebody who is living in Benjaminite territory, but he's not local. Okay? That's just how this is a setup when you start hearing about this guy. And it says that he was detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. I'm not sure what it means by detained before the Lord. David said to Ahimelech, is there no spear or sword here with you? I did not bring my sword or my weapons with me because the king's business required haste. So he's trying to give an excuse. I had to get out and get on this mission before I could really arm myself. Back home, he's got all of Jonathan's stuff. Okay? The priest said, the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. Now, understand there are two kinds of ephods. One ephod is a breastplate that's worn by the priest when he's going to make a prophecy. Okay? The other ephod is the linen vestment that the priest wears. So you can say it's the thing or it's the garment. Either one qualifies as an ephod. All right. If you will take it, take it, for there is none except that one. David said, there is none like it, give it to me. All right. Let's drop back 5 and 20. All right. This thing with the bread is important. Okay? You have something sacred. And there is an urgent need for something that is sacred to be used in a way that is not sacred. Now the question is, do you maintain the sanctity of something that is sacred, regardless of what is going on around you in the world? Or can you violate that sanctity for the sake of an urgent need? Okay? Let me give you a Queen Street example. During the Civil War, there were 2 battles fought here in Kinston. Okay? During one of those battles, Queen Street Methodist Episcopal Church South was used as a hospital. Yeah, not this
It
one.
wasn't Queen Street.
Huh?
It
Oh, it
wasn't.
wasn't Queen Street. It was the Kinston method. Thank you. That's right. Because we weren't on Queen Street back then, but we had aspirations. Anyway, the Methodist Episcopal Church South in Kinston was used as a hospital during one of those engagements. And I heard that there was another engagement where it was used as a stable. Okay? So probably the second battle, I would think it was used as a stable.
They used the basement as a stable.
They used the basement. Okay. I don't know how they got the horses up and down, but you know. Anyway. I could make a comment about upstairs or downstairs where the horse stuff was. Anyway. In any event, Queen Street was no longer a sacred place when it was starting to be used for those purposes. Okay? During a major hurricane in Mississippi, I took a team down to Mississippi, to Gulfport, to help with the recovery. And there was a church that was hosting the teams that went down there, okay? And I won't give a long story about how we found the place, but we found it. And middle of the night, moved in. The place was absolutely full. There were people sleeping in classrooms, in the fellowship hall, in the sanctuary, in the choir loft. Teams were everywhere in that church, so that it was difficult for that church to be church. Okay? Same thing happened to Grifton, just up the road from here. Okay? Their church hosted volunteer teams, and they were inundated with teams for a long time after a major hurricane here in North Carolina. Now, I know the damage that did to the Grifton church. When the pastor left there, he had a nervous breakdown. And generally speaking, I was in disaster work for a long time, working with churches, religious groups. Generally speaking, if a church opened its doors to host volunteer teams for any kind of an extended period, that pastor would be moving the next year. And the stress of putting that church back together again was massive. So, you know, I've always advocated to our conference, if you're going to bring teams in, set up a place for them outside of a church. It could be on church property, but not in the church, because the church itself has to recover from the disaster in order to meet the spiritual needs of the people. And I remember in Mississippi, there was a choir practice that was supposed to take place, and people were all up in the choir loft, and they couldn't have their choir practice, and you know, they had to ask people to move and all that. Yes, there are times when, and we know this especially during times of war, that churches have typically been used for hospitals. It happened all the time in the Civil War, all over the place, north and south. And so the question is, if you have a sacred place, can it be used for an emergency need? Okay? And generally speaking, people are going to say, well, yeah, you know, the church should be used to take care of the needs of the people. Fast forward to the New Testament, I guess, or fast back from what I was just saying. But here Jesus is walking through a field on the Sabbath, and his disciples are with him, and they're grabbing heads of grains of wheat as they go by. So, and they're just going to eat that wheat, okay? And he's being criticized because that constitutes work on the Sabbath according to the Pharisees. So they have violated Sabbath. And what does David do? He refers back to what does Jesus do? He refers back to what David did with Ahimelech. Okay? There's an urgent need for the bread. So they went ahead and used the bread for a secular purpose, because it wasn't just a secular purpose, it was also, according to David, a holy purpose, because he was going into a holy war. He lied to the priest about it, but he refers to that operation specifically as a common. At first he says it's a secret mission, and we're keeping ourselves ritually clean because the king put us on a sacred mission. But then he refers to that mission as a common mission later on. Okay, and the priest still gives them the bread. So these are questions that arise every once in a while, especially in an area where a disaster has happened, or there's a war, or an urgent need. Supposing Queen Street is surrounded by homeless people, and they make the decision to allow the homeless people to stay in the church. Okay, I think there would be a lot of discussion about that.
There would be, but that's what God wants us to do. Don't you think this
Yes.
is all providence? I mean, didn't God, he's
That's-
saving David, I mean.
Yes, and that's the argument that Jesus uses with the Pharisees.
Right.
Okay, if you see it, and he also talks about, like, okay, Pharisees, what happens on the Sabbath if your ox is in the ditch? Can you take the ox out of the ditch? Yeah, you can. Is that work? I would think so. Okay, but the urgency of the situation, when they rebuilt the city walls in Jerusalem, when they came back from the Persian Empire, they put guards on the walls because they were subject to being attacked at any time. And so you see that the workers, they were like combat engineers. They carried weapons while they were working. Okay, but the guards on the walls could continue to be guards on the walls during the Sabbath, even though it was work. So sometimes you have to look at it and say, okay, what's God's priority here? Okay, and when you get into the book of Isaiah and some of the minor prophets, there is a retreat from ritual and an advancement of sincerity and ethical action that is supposed to take place. The ethical action, the personal relationship with God, transcends the rituals of the religion. Okay? Now, some religions stick to sacrament much more tightly, okay, than others do. And is that a bad thing? No, it's not a bad thing, okay? But when the question arises whether or not you're going to take care of an urgent need, or, like for instance, you're driving to church on Sunday morning and you see an accident on the side of the road and somebody is stuck in their car, are you going to stop and help them, or are you going to continue on to church? The story of the Good Samaritan, I think, is a good example of that, okay? So what you're seeing here is a change of priorities in the orientation toward the ritual of the religion. And David, on a number of occasions, seems to exceed or disregard the niceties of the cult, the religion, in favor of doing the mission that he thinks God has assigned him. Okay? One of the things that was terrible, awful about the time when there was a Protestant Reformation was that the Catholic Church was using the rituals of the church to completely dominate the population so that they could hold hostage the kings and princes of the day to the idea that they could be excommunicated. Okay? And then if they were excommunicated, then everyone who was subject to them was automatically excommunicated as well. And during that period, the latter part, just before the Protestant Reformation, the largest holder of lands and serfs in Europe was the church. So they had slaves, they had land, more than any king or prince could claim. And finally, when the Protestants took over, especially on the mainland of Europe, they said, we're not going to be bound by these rituals so much, and we're not going to be reliant on whether or not a priest can tell us whether we're going to heaven or hell. We're going to make our peace with God, and we're not going to go through an intermediary to do it. And of course, there were wars fought over that, vicious ones on both sides. When it got to England, they didn't really do away with the ritual, they just did away with the Pope. So, put the king in charge. How ethical is that? Anyway. But this tension that exists between what really happens in a ritual and, like for instance, we follow actually the Catholic tradition and call the Lord's Supper and baptism sacrament. We don't have as many sacraments as the Catholic Church, but from our understanding of what happens in sacrament is identical to what the Catholic Church believes. Okay, except for the transubstantiation part. But in terms of what happens to the person coming up, who comes up in sincerity, we believe, like the Catholics do, that there is a cleansing that takes place as a result of that sacrament, okay? But when you get a mainland reformist, like the Anabaptists, the Presbyterians, and all of those, they don't call them sacrament, they call them ordinals, because Christ ordered us to do it. And that it is a memorial, a remembrance. So when you see on an altar in remembrance of me, yes, Christ did say that, okay? But that's kind of a mainland Protestant kind of thing that they really hung on to.
So that's what we had growing up.
Yes, that's what we had growing up. Yeah. Yeah, they did not consider it to be transformative. It was instead a profession of your faith, not an act of God on you. Okay? But you can understand with the overreach of the Roman Catholic Church at that time that people said, my salvation is not in the hands of some person. It's in the hands of Christ. And you can see where they would drop back from that. So these tensions still exist for us today. What is actually sacred? What is the effect of being sacred? I know that when somebody burned down our church in Farmville, the news was out there, and they stuck a microphone in my face, and they said, "What do you think, Pastor?" I said, "I think that the church did not burn, just the building." So, anyway, this is one of the first precedents where you see the dynamics of that discussion taking place in the Old Testament. All right, David then runs away. Okay, so now he's got Goliath's sword. Now, this next part doesn't make a lot of sense to me, okay? He's got Goliath's sword. Everybody knows how he got that sword in the first place, okay? And where does he go? He goes to Gath. What is that? That's Goliath's hometown. Shazam. Okay, David rose and fled that day from Saul. He went to King Achish of Gath. The servants of Achish said to him, "Is this not David, the king of the land?" Now they're recognizing him as the king. Okay? The king of the land. Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000. So they already know the story of David and Goliath. Okay? David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of King Achish of Gath, and he should be. So he changed his behavior before them. He pretended to be mad when in their presence. He scratched the marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Achish said to his servants, "Look, you see how the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" All right, what is this? Okay, what is he really saying here? Okay, from from a Jewish perspective, he says, we've got enough nuts here in Philistia. We don't need any more, okay? And he also knows that David's faking it. He's being the madman. Okay? Now, understand that you start getting into some of these bizarre behaviors in the Jewish context, it is a prophetic ecstasy that you're going through. Okay? When you get into Philistia, I might say a much more sophisticated society, they just think you're nuts. Kind of an interesting thing there. But anyway, what he does is, we're going to see King Achish later on in this story. Maybe it's a good thing that I didn't bring chapter 22 with me. But
So how does he know that he's faking this? Achish knows. How does you said that Achish knows that he's pretending? He's not really mad.
because maybe David's not good at being nuts. Okay? And you're going to see later on that there is a relationship develops between David and Achish. Because who is Achish's real adversary? Here's David, who shows up all by himself, or King Saul with an army. Okay, so Saul is the bigger threat to Philistia, even though David has killed a bunch of Philistines. And when they talk about the ladies were all singing about he killed his thousands. Thousands of what? Philistines. Okay? So, I mean, and you might say also just the fact that David shows up in Gath, that's nuts.
Well, was it self-preservation? Is what I'm saying. He was saving himself because he was in trouble. I think he was pretty unique to act like he was mad.
Well,
What other way was he going to protect himself?
Well, he knew Saul wasn't going to chase after him. Okay? But what we see here with David is this is just the opening gambit that he's playing with the king. Because we'll see later on that these guys get along pretty well. Okay? We also see that David is always disingenuous in his dealings. He's a very sneaky guy. Okay? And he does things horribly and covers his tracks. He's sneaky and he's clever. Just the kinds of things that you want to see in a king. King David is not my favorite king, by the way.
I can tell that very much so. It's right out there for me, so I'm having a hard time with that. Because I feel like David was chosen by God, and God is with him, and so the things that David is doing is God's helping him.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, God has a job for him, and he's protecting him.
Yes.
And so in spite of the fact that he's sneaky and he lies and he does all these other things, he still has a relationship with God. And he always goes to God and asks for forgiveness of the things that he's done.
Oh, we're going to get into that later. But
Well,
okay,
just
the
take that
nature of monarchy and the relation of monarchy to God will have a radical change between Saul and David. Okay? To me, this is me.
Right, and this is me, so,
Okay. Saul actually had a more authentic relationship with God than David. And the aspects of Saul's monarchy would be much more acceptable in our understanding of monarchy today than David's monarchy. Okay? Nobody today would countenance a monarchy like David unless it was just an outright militarily supported dictatorship. Saul listened to the people.
David listened to God.
Saul was accountable to the people. David was only accountable to God, which is the model for our understanding of monarchy today. It is the claim that every monarch makes makes, that they are only accountable to God, not accountable to their subjects. And David epitomizes that and sets the precedent for it. Okay, and he will do anything. He will do anything to preserve himself.
So by his acting like he was crazy, saved his life.
Yes, it did.
So they let him go.
Yes,
Right.
yes, they let him go, but he didn't really let him go because he thought he was nuts. He didn't think he was nuts. He thought he was faking it. Okay, he let him go because David was an adversary of his adversary.
Why would he even go there? Why would he go? Why would you kill 10,000 or thousands, whatever, of these people, and then go to their land? I mean, I'm surprised they didn't kill him when he stepped foot on their land.
Because he was.
Why did we make Russia an ally in World War II?
Necessity. Necessity
Because
is
he
the
thought
only reason.
Saul would follow him there.
Saul would not follow him there. And everybody knew that he was an adversary of Saul. And he thought, maybe I've got a little leverage with this king.
That makes sense.
Oh, that's right. I need to tell you that we will be away next week. And so we are not going to have a class next week. But we're going to have a celebration a week after that. I don't know if I'm going to have a class then, because everything's going to be set up down here. We'll try and do a class anyway. How's that sound? 28th, I'll be back, and we'll be doing stuff about David and Achish. Okay. In the meantime, God bless you. Have a great day, and keep reading about this. See what you think about it, and send me a comment if you want. You can even subscribe to this and give me a thumbs up or down. But I'll try to respond to whatever I can. Okay. God bless you all.
No pressure.